So the theme of my presentation is going to be the productivity paradox. And the reason for this is right now I think we're facing an interesting time. On one hand, organizations are looking to improve developer productivity, right? We need to do more with less. If you're lucky, you can do more with the same amount. At the same time, we are also seeing an increase in the ask to be a lot more secure, safe. We want the software to be a lot more reliable, right? And so we're seeing a lot of processes being created to make that happen. So when you put the two together, you get sparks, right? On one hand, you want to go fast. On the other, you say, well, slow down, cowboy. You cannot go that fast, right? And so you go from a place essentially where developers created CI, right? Kosuke created CI because he was bored doing the same things again and again, right? So it's like, well, if I need to compile and build and run my unit test, and okay, let's get a machine to do that in a clean room environment. So developers created this, and it got kind of hijacked by everybody else, right? So when we say shift left, we actually mean hijack, right? And so nowadays, you pretty much have in typical pipeline 5, 6 different security scanners, for example, and it's convenient, right? You tell developers, you just add this keyword in your pipeline, some things will take place. You don't need to worry about it. We will maintain it, it's all good. Yeah, it's all good except their pipeline went from 3 minutes runtime to 110 minutes runtime because it does a bunch of things. And then they get all of the signals back, a tsunami of issues and problems, and they become DJs that have to essentially go from one application to the other to understand what's going on. Well, long story short, you know where this goes. They ignore those at some point, right? Too much noise means it's just noise. So that's a problem I'd like to talk about today. We're going to cover it through 3 solutions. We're going to talk about Jenkins, obviously. We're going to talk about it in the context of the CloudBees Platform. And last but not least, in the context of Launchable, the company that Kosuke has co-created with Harpreet. All right, so let's start with Jenkins. In the last year, we've delivered at CloudBees, I think, what is the best innovation since the start of CloudBees when it comes to Jenkins. One of those key elements is HAHS, so high availability, horizontal scalability. What does that mean? It means that, well, you probably all know that the way Jenkins works, you have this controller that orchestrates the work across agents. And so it's a single point of failure. It's very important. And so if it crashes, or if, say, the availability zone it's running on crashes, anything bad happens, well, you cannot do anything. And that's frustrating for lots of people. It's frustrating for the business first and foremost, right? Let's not forget that CI or CD is your path to production. So if you can't use that path, you don't go to production. You want to fix a security bug? Well, wait. We're going to have to fix the path first, right? So you have this critical path that's a real problem. And then it's highly frustrating for developers, right? You want to make them productive and happy. What happens? Yeah, well, the first few times they'll be happy to go play some games, right? But if it's recurring, you're facing a real problem. So we created this high availability, which is not just like a mere cold standby, passive node, right? We're talking about active, hot failover, meaning no downtime. If anything goes wrong, boom, the request is handled on a different replica. And if you go further, you could say, well, why stop with 2 replica? I could have had 3, 4, 5, 6. They're hot failover, right? Well, they're warm replica, so they can handle load, actually. And so what that means is if you have big surge in builds, you might have that, say, security issue needs to be fixed in a jar. You end up with 100 projects that need to be recompiled, rebuilt, re-released. You're going to have this huge mass of work going to your cluster. How do you handle that? Well, the worst will happen, right? If you have a limited controller environment, it's going to crash at the worst possible time. You need it now. You don't need it in 2 weeks. So with this, you get to scale to immense load with a single controller without having to slicing away your pipelines. So that's a very big one. We also invested in Pipeline Explorer. Who is using Pipeline Explorer here, maybe? All right. Okay, a handful of hands. If a pipeline goes wrong, then the boredom really starts, right? You have to download those big files, load them into your best text editor, and then do the voodoo magic to start searching for the right keywords, like error, exceptions, and what's not, right? But it's very hard to achieve. You lose a lot of time. With Pipeline Explorer, we brought that to the next level, making it possible within your browser to go directly to where things go wrong, right? So improvement in terms of efficiency is huge, absolutely huge. Workspace caching, a big one as well. It's pretty cool that anytime you do a build, you don't need to re-download the internet, right? Those kind of things really get to help developers be a lot more efficient. And so if we look at the impact of this, we can do it in two ways. We can look at it in micro or macro ways. This is a micro way, which is this customer has about 2,000 developers. Their legal team asks them to remain anonymous. But we're looking at HA, and with HA, we're talking about the equivalent of 10 FTE that have been saved in terms of efficiency. If you look at Pipeline Explorer, 15 FTE. Combined, 25 FTE just with those features. And those are just a tangible, this is just a tangible return on investment, right? You have all of the intangible. If your developers are happy, how much is that worth? I think it's worth quite a bit, right? But it takes time to get people pissed or happy. And quite frankly, it plays in delivering to people an environment where they like working, where they have fun, where it never goes down and so on. I was talking about train system with some of you a few minutes ago, right? If you cannot trust the system, well, next time, maybe you take your car. If you step back now, look at the macro level of this. So this is a cohort of customers sending back data to CloudBees in the last 11 months. And you see a jump in 10 months of 50% in the number of builds that has been achieved. So sure, I'm sure those customers have created a few more pipelines, a few more applications, but not 50%, maybe 5%, right? What we're seeing here, what we're witnessing is when things go better, you get to do more, right? If it doesn't take you 8 hours to find out why your pipeline is dead, but maybe it takes you 10 minutes. If your cluster doesn't go down, right? You get to do more things. You get more bites at the apple, and you see this 50% jump on just the same cohort of customers that have deployed those services. I think this is pretty impressive. All right, so where are we going next for some of those features? For HA, holding upgrades. This is really amazing. It gives you so much more control on how and when you do those upgrades for Jenkins. Imagine, it's not just failover. It's upgrading your clusters with a new version of Jenkins and all of the plugins with no downtime, right? So it's not just your developers that will love you. It's production teams, right? No need to come during the weekend or at night to do this messy upgrade process. You can upgrade the new version, start failing over, looking at how it works, and if you have problems, fix those, come back, but you have this flexibility to control things and have a zero downtime environment. I think it's pretty amazing. And Pipeline Explorer is evolving even more to get a visual view. Some of us are more visual than others, so what if we could leverage this to go even faster? Well, why don't we take a look? So this is a good old Jenkins you know and like. There is one small change. So if I go on the URL, just for your information, and you look at this, it says jazz.cloudbees.io. So it's not a typo, it's not a jazz and music or anything like that. It's Jenkins as a service. So we're in a limited preview at this point of a Jenkins as a service running on the CloudBees platform, because a lot of organizations love Jenkins but don't love maintaining it. So some of them want to outsource this. So this is running on the platform. Then one team member told me, well, I think the build didn't go fine. There is a problem somewhere. Can you take a look? Yeah, sure. So it's this one, run all builds. Take the last build. Seems cool, right? I have green here. I start the Pipeline Explorer, and boom, I directly land on the structure of my build, right? You can see to the right the structure of the build. You can navigate very quickly and start going into that log. You can do some sophisticated search within the browser without the problem of loading all of that data within the browser. And then you can see the structure, right? You have parallel builds here, for example. Well, I want to see each and every step, right? And I can click on it, and directly I'm going to have my log go to the right place, right? So in terms of efficiency, it makes it very, very quick to go to the place you need to. We also added a lot more configuration. If you looked at this a while ago, the configurability of Pipeline Explorer is also much, much improved. But you might be a lot more visual and you think that you want to go and see things. Well, if you go at the top left, you can see what looks like a map here, right? Well, if you click on that map, beautiful things happen. You get to visualize your pipeline and get a chance to see what's going wrong, right? You want to see maybe this step. I want to go to the filtered log. I go to the log directly, one shot. If you had a big screen, which is not my case, you could do both at the same time and do both. So that's pretty cool as well. Well, it looks clearly that in that case there was no problem, so we're lucky. So let's look at a different one maybe. If I look at Kubernetes plugin, I see it's red. What's going to happen here, that's pretty cool, is it directly puts me to the place where I have my problem, right, within the log. It detects where that issue is going to be and bring me there automatically. And you see, top left, there is this exclamation mark with a number 1. Well, it seems like the system has something to tell me. If I click on it, it's going to tell me, here is why it failed. Here is the message, here is the problem. We're currently working on the next iteration of this, leveraging LLM and the CloudBees knowledge base to not just tell you what's wrong, but how you can fix it, what you can do about it, right? So accelerating that step even further. And in that case, if I click on my pipeline maps, it's not going to be that exciting, quite frankly, because it's a pretty small pipeline. So at this point, it might look like, well, it's pretty cute, right, your maps, but does it really get me any advantage? Well, let me show you a pipeline that we're using at CloudBees. This is a copy of that pipeline that we're using to release our software, and you'll understand why sometimes it makes sense to quickly be able to zoom in and zoom out and see what's going on, right? So we can see who started the job there, the reason for the trigger, the start, and you see all of the parallel steps. So we're creating the images, testing on a bunch of operating systems, JDK, and so on. So that's a kind of view where you can quickly see where things go wrong. Equally, if you don't have a way to quickly drill down into the problem, you could have fun with your log files, I can tell you that much. That's it for the first part of this demo. Let's go back to slides. Let's talk about the CloudBees Platform. Okay. The goal of the CloudBees Platform that was released in the last year as well is really to solve the paradox I was talking about a few minutes ago, okay? And let's go through each persona in some way, right? Developers, they need to be empowered, right? They like to make choices. They like to be creative. If you don't restrict them, well, you have to restrict them a little bit, right? But if you give them the opportunity to make some choices, they'll be much more productive, right? And so that's important to do, which means that for us, what's important is that we get to integrate with whatever they are using, okay? You probably have thousands of Jenkins pipeline, and that's great. Don't change anything to that, because we can offer the next mile in how you're going to do continuous delivery, how you can do release orchestration, feature management, manage your security, your compliance, and so on. But equally, some teams might be starting to do GitHub action. That's great. If they like it, a lot of team members that I know start putting some unit tests, some basic stuff in there. Well, reuse that, leverage this, and bring them this same next mile as well to do continuous delivery, release orchestration, security, compliance, right? So you have two different worlds in some way, and get them to amplify each other rather than try to get everything normalized. So once you get your teams to be empowered, to have freedom, and to have a self-service environment, you might think, okay, now it's going to look like a zoo very quickly, right? So I need to put some control. That's where the platform teams come into the picture. Platform teams on the platform are able, first and foremost, to define the structure of the company, right? You have different organizations, business units, maybe you have front-end team, back-end teams, applications. So you build that tree, that visual tree really of organization, sub-organization, going as deep as you want. And what's cool about it is that at every point along the way, you get to define the guide rails of your teams, right? So maybe you have some things that will equally apply to everybody in your company. But for some other stuff, you might say, well, actually, you know what? For the internal applications, you can deploy continuously to production. We don't care. We trust you. It's going to be fine. However, for customer-facing applications, now we want somebody with a segmentation of responsibility to approve those after validation. Maybe they go in ServiceNow, whatever, but we want a lot stricter protocol, right? So every team might have their own cloud environment, their own resources, their own keys, their own compliance requirement and so on. And you decorate essentially that tree with whatever you want to have as part of your company. This is your DNA, what right looks like, okay? And when you combine those two things, good things happen. You have that freedom coming in, and as long as it fits within that perimeter, no problem. And if there is a shock, something that shouldn't happen, we will raise those, but specifically those, and give you focus on what you actually need to solve for, rather than constrain you all the way. Last but not least, for the organization, we talked about efficiency. It's great to say we're going to make developers efficient, but you need to actually show it. So can you visualize this? Can you get those metrics to back and see how much you're improving over time? And if not, is it a region? Is it a team? Is it a type of technologies that's not delivering on the promise? You need to be able to drill down high and up as much as you want, right? And segment those things. Otherwise, it makes no sense. The same for security, the same for compliance, right? You need to have those multiple facets you can look your organization through. And all of this is working on open foundations. Again, I think it's just a summary of what I said before, but our view has always been to embrace and extend rather than tell you you should replace what you have, right? We're going to leverage whatever you have. You might have thousands of Jenkins pipeline. You might start to have GitHub Action floating left and right. You might acquire a company that has some Circle CI, or I don't know what. We're going to be integrating with those and sucking all of the data we receive. We're talking about in-depth integration into the event bus, not just, random integration. Collect that data, store it in our DevSecOps data model as part of the platform, so you can then slice and dice this information at your will. A few more screens before I go into the demo. You're going to see that screen. That's a visual editor for workflows, right? You won't find a different language or a different layout if you do CD or RO or CI. All of those can be done in the same tool. I was always amazed to think that you need to learn different languages to just craft workflows, right? And this is where the deep integration comes in, right? You could say, whenever my Jenkins pipeline is over, call that, because what happens next is here for the release engineering team. Or you could say, no, I want to do the other way around. I have an SRE team, and every once in a while, they push something new to production. And as part of this, it's going to call back Jenkins or GitHub Action, do all of the work, the good work that has been done by developers, orchestrate that, come back once it's over, and go to the next stage, right? This is what we mean by combining those two worlds. Let this creativity be across the board. The language you can see to the right is actually the same as GitHub Action, because a lot of people know it now, this YAML, but it's not GitHub Action under the hood. We live translate this to Tecton running on Kubernetes, on containers. It's extremely fast. And it's a good way to leverage a grammar without having to relearn one. But it's really a powerful Tecton engine under the hood. Security and compliance, that's a very important one, right? What I was saying before about developers being hijacked in some way, or their pipeline being hijacked with lots of things that they might not directly care about. Doesn't mean they don't care about security. Do they care about 6 scanners? I'm not sure. So there is a gray zone in between, right? What we do at CloudBees is that anytime you hook a repository or a pipeline within the platform, and we're even working on the next phase where you don't even need to hook anything. We discover those and we bring them in. We're going to directly look and define a baseline, a security baseline, okay? So you don't need to do anything, nor the platform teams or your CI teams. Nobody needs to do anything. we're going to see that in action. And much like an eagle flying over your domain, right? We're going to start looking at all of your assets that are involved in that application and take that feedback. So if you want, by default, to have 5 scanners to do that, we'll run the 5 scanners. It's going to depend on the type of applications, obviously. Normalize the output on the same data model, deduplicate, and start looking at whether you should do something about it. But at least it gives you a way of communicating with team. You're not throwing them like, logs from 5 different tools with exceptions left and right, and they have to jump on tools and figure it out. No, we're going to do that work, normalize it, and then you can have a discussion. Should you go to production with this or not? What do we do about it? What do we want to fix before going to production, right? So it provides a real nice way to have a dialogue rather than a wall. And last but not least, actionable insights, Flow, DORA, software delivery, security, all of those are being populated as we listen to those signals coming from those different systems or directly running on the platform. But if they're on third-party system, all good, we're going to see that as well. You ready for some demo? So Philip, you're my victim today. So Philip started working on a fancy application called Hacker News or Hacker Source, I think, but it's Hacker News clearly, because he's a news junkie. So during his free time, he started doing some code, and you can see it's a good start, right? You have some news indeed. It's not very appealing per se, so he wants to make this a bit more sexy. So he wants to add a banner because a banner would bring some more color, and then he wants to use some gamification, put some scores so people know, oh, this one, lots of discussion going on there. Let me go and see what's going on, right? So he wants to do a few things, but now he wants to really do the right thing. He was kind of doing this in his corner. Now he wants to make it a formal application from CloudBees. So let's go and let's go through the process of what I would do as a platform team to make that happen, okay? So he told me that he has a repository on GitHub. It's called Hacker Source, right? You can see it here. It's a normal repository. What can I see? 2 branches. Yep, he told me that he's put the new code on a branch called Score. So that's good. That's a good idea. And I can see he did actually some workflows there. So that's a GitHub action. What do we have? Well, he's done a pretty basic GitHub action, right? He's building his code, and then he's doing some unit tests and uploading the test results. So nothing fancy. But for a developer, that makes a lot of sense, right? I'm not expecting him to do anything more sophisticated. That's good enough for me in terms of what he does. And quite frankly, I'm sure he's going to maintain that and add a few more things. So I might as well leverage this rather than discard it, okay? So what I'm going to do to not mess up with Philip, I'm going to first clone that repository, right? All right, let me go with that. So I'm going to fork it here. I'm going to put it in the CloudBees days. We're going to call it Munich. All right. I'm going to copy all branches because we saw that there was something on a branch. So that's being forked at this point. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to merge that branch. So I'm going to do a pull request. I'm going to go and put the score into main. So I can see here that is indeed added some of the stuff that's required for the scoring. So I create my pull request, merging score branch. All right, create my pull request. It's going to check that it's all fine. And then let's go and do it. All right. So I've done my preparation work. That's all good. Now I'm going to go on the platform. So if you go on the platform here, 2 things are important. First, to the left, you will see this organization that I was talking about, right? How you can structure your company by teams, by region, by product, whatever you want to use, right? That's actually one that we are actively using, as you can see. So you create your environment. And we're going to be drilling down a little bit into this in just a minute. But that's where you start defining your structure. So let me go back. Hacker, organized, it's here, okay? And then what you see in the middle here is a key component of what exists in the CloudBees platform. They're called components. So what's a component? The best way to see that, in my opinion, is to think about how you wrap a repository so that you can extend it with other things, right? You can extend it with feature flags, you can extend it with read orchestration, with security aspects. So it's just a way to wrap that thing. So let's do that, right? We're gonna create a component for our newly created repository. I called it Munich. So it's here, Hacker Source Munich, up on the main branch. I'm gonna call the Hacker Source Munich is great. Create, and now I've established formally the link between my platform and the repository that contains Philip code, okay? So what's gonna happen now? I haven't done anything, right? But if I go on the runs here, I'm starting to see something spinning. What is that? You can see it says implicit code security analysis. Okay, so I haven't done anything. That's pretty useful, right? I can click on it, right? I get the run details, so I can see that it's operating something here, and I have my pipeline executing step by step. So what the platform did is that it went to GitHub, looked at my project, looked at what code, what it's using, and so on, and defined what a baseline security analysis should be. And that's operating right now, okay? So we had a SCC scanner, GhostSec scanner, now NGS is running, GitLeak is running. So some of those things are running. Again, zero work. The eagle is flying in the sky and looking at how things seem to be. Okay, now we're done. The execution is over. If I go in the summary of my component, it will start populating data from that data model, okay? What do I see to my top right here? Oh, I have a security summary that started to get populated. And I have 2 high issues. Okay, not great. I'm going to click on it, okay? And I land on a different screen, which is called the Security Center. So you can see the same information, but you have more details. It tells you that GitLeaks scanner found 2 findings, and if I click on it, they're high, and it found 2 of those issues, right? So I have a sense for what that is. I think Philip was a bit quick in building things, and if I click on the link, I can see that in the code, what did he put? He put a key. That's a big no-no, Philip, okay? Don't do that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna simply delete that file, okay? I'm gonna commit my changes, big no-no, commit, and that's it. So I'm not gonna do both because one is, I think, good enough to understand the point I'm doing. I'm back to the platform, I go back to runs, and oh, I've got an implicit security analysis that started again, right? So anytime anything changes in my environment, in that case, this repository, it's scanning again things. And hopefully it's gonna see that I've done like 100%, well, 50% improvement in my posture, right? So click on it, see the execution going on here. As it's finishing here, let me show you something. If you go to the left here, you have under the Security Center where we were, you have the marketplace. And the marketplace has dozens of integration. Here we've enabled a number of open source tools that create this baseline I was talking about. You could decide to put your own. And at the top right here, you can see that higher up in my organization, somebody said, yep, we want to do the implicit security assessment. So, which is what we're doing right now, right? That's the eagle. You activated the eagle to fly in the sky, okay? So now I go back to my run. I think it's over, so I can directly go in my summary. I see that we're back to 1, okay? We had 2, removed 1 file, we're left with 1. Good enough for the demo. Let's go to the next step. So at this point, I have a sense of where things are. I still haven't deployed my work. So I'm going to go in workflows for my components. And as you can see here, I don't have any workflow because the workflow that was executing was not my workflow. It was a system workflow. So normal, we don't see anything. So I'm going to create one. I have a create workflow here. And I get to the picture you've seen during the presentation on the slides, right? So I'm not going to write some GitHub action because I would be unable to do so. And that would be heavily boring. So I'm just going to copy ones that I've created minutes ago, okay? So you can see here the structure of the pipeline. As we zoom in, we start seeing the steps within those. So I have a trigger. quite frankly, since Philip is not going to be doing pushes on his own as an SRE, I'm going to instead change the trigger, add a trigger here. I have multiple triggers. I'm going to make a manual trigger. I'll be the one calling things out. No input parameters. And I'm going to remove the push that was there. We don't need that. Okay. Then I see I have some tests going on. And the first step here, what am I doing? I'm actually calling out GitHub action. Okay. That's where I'm saying I need to leverage the environment that has been built. I can just use this GitHub action and let it execute and capture the outcome of this and feed it into the data model. It could be a Jenkins pipeline, would work equally well. Then I can see I'm building the container. In parallel, I'm running some additional scan. Here I'm using Sneak, I'm using SonarQube. In the deploy step here is interesting because you don't see any gate here in my deploy, right? You can see that I'm gonna be setting kubeconfig, deploy into cluster and so on. But there is here this tag that says environment, DOW, DevOps world, production, okay? So we're gonna drill down into this in a minute. So now I've got my pipeline ready. I'm gonna commit it, my first workflow, commit to the main branch, finish, and we're good. So here, first of all, I've put some code in my repository. So obviously the scanner will start working again to see if anything goes wrong. But here I can start my pipeline manually because I said that's what I wanted. So now I'm going to have two execution in my runs, right? I'm going to have the implicit code security analysis, and I'm going to have the pipeline I just started running, okay? Yep, main workflow is executing at this point. You can see it's in the test stage. Right now, it's executing, okay? So now let's go back to what I said before. If you go higher up, right, I'm Hacker Source Munich, I go to my organization at the top. And there you have a lot more information because that's where you define your company, right? And so you have environments, and that's where we define the target environment. So you can see here, we have a bunch of those, and one of them is DOW production. That's the one where we're deploying. But you can see it has a policy of approval request. So separation of concern, a team is deploying, a team will approve, okay? And you get to define who is doing what. You can also see to the right that I have actually some flags, some feature flags. And that's very nice about the platform. We're deeply integrating CI, CD, release orchestration, security, feature flag, all of those on the same data model, and they share information. So if I go on my flags here, because Philip is very much into flags, I can see the score here, the header color. What's interesting is that the first one, the header color is on. I think I take limited risk in going there. The score, it's off for now. That's fine. If I look at the logic, it says if the target group is those of beta users, then I consider that flag, right? So it's off for now, but it's only going to be on for beta users anyway using this logic. Now that it's running, I can also show you a few things. I can go in the analytics, right? If you want to see software delivery activities, you can start seeing a bunch of those being fed into the system over time, right? This is for my hacker source, so all of the components below are taken in account, hold up. If I wanted to go below, I just take a component. If I want to go higher up, I just go higher up, and then I can filter out what I don't want. I get to do security insights. We've already seen that in the past. The flow metrics, well, we would need to integrate Jira, right? Because we need to get access to Jira information to properly account for those things. So I can show you that in a minute. You have DORA metrics as well, test insights. So you have a bunch of things that we're adding constantly to the platform. For flow metrics, if I was to go higher up in CBP, I think, CBP here, I'm sure I would be able to see some flow metrics. Yeah, you can start seeing those, okay? All right, let's go back to our Munich entry here. And the main workflow, where is it? So, yep, that executed. What's pretty cool when it executes, if I click on test, I go in evidence. Takes a bit of time to load from the evidence store, but we're storing evidence for every step along the way, okay? That's a test evidence for that pipeline. If you want to do scans, Well, you have the security evidence as well. So we're storing all of that information. Think about your cybersec team when they ask for evidence. That's in there, the pipeline. Every pipeline has this information. Here we're building the container. I don't think we have evidence yet. We're going to have, once a container is uploaded, we're going to get the link to a Docker Hub. We're going to get to the deploy step, but the script should pause at that point in time and tell me, well, it's great. You want to deploy, willing to do that, but you need somebody else to go and confirm that this step is going fine. It says deploy. So if you click on it, well, you don't even need to click on it. You see at the top here, it says, do you want to approve or reject? So I get to approved. I can put my comment, go, 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 right? Save, and then my deployment can indeed take place to production, right? So it's executing now those steps, all right? So now, as the execution is happening, we can go back to our application, which is here, Hacker Organized. So normally it's live. Yeah, it's live. I see no banner, no score. Well, we said it was for beta users, right? So I'm going to log in as beta user. Boom, I get my banner. It's all great. If I go and look at my news, I still don't have a score. So at that point in time, I can go back to my platform. I'll go on Hacker Source, Hacker Organized, sorry. I've got my flags. Where is that? Here. Default score. Put it to on. Go back to my application. And my score are here. Okay? So very easy integration in between all of those components. In just a few minutes, we took a repository, created a baseline from a security standpoint, then created a workflow. That workflow leveraged GitHub Action in a deep way to extract inside a bunch of things, but also the work done by developers, and was able to then do additional scanning, additional testing, deploy to production, make sure that we have proper release orchestration with validation of the target environment, push to production, and play with feature flags, right? Just takes a few minutes. All of that you can create templates for as well. So it's really an efficient way to do that. Philippe, thank you for your application. You're a true hacker. Just a few more minutes. We can do more in terms of efficiency, and I'm introducing the presentation that Kosuke will do here. So I'm not going to talk too much about those slides, but testing takes a lot of time for developers, right? If you look at the software delivery lifecycle, it's a big, big piece, up to 40% depending on the project. Obviously, we're in Munich. We have a lot of embedded industry. Embedded means you don't upgrade it just like that, meaning you'd better have a lot of tests to make sure it goes well. But those tests tend not to be structured, organized, right, based on the likelihood they're going to be failing, right? So here we have a test suite, might have a long tail of 100,000 tests, but they're just randomly spread based on when you created those, right? But if one test is very likely to fail, maybe it's going to happen in 2 hours, and the ones that are just basic things that always pass, there's the first one. So it doesn't really make sense, right? So if you could reorganize, that would make a lot of sense. And so every screen has a Launchable tab. Obviously, we just created this application, so it doesn't have much history. We're going to have, and Kosuke will be working on this one. But really, the idea of AI augmented QA is to say, can we leverage the power of AI to see how we can improve that, right? You know it. Sometimes you do one bug, you get 600 errors showing up in your test suite. It's blowing away everywhere, right? Well, it's one thing. So can we leverage AI to tell us, yeah, it's 600 things, but forget, that's this one here. Can we leverage AI to tell us, well, you know what, this test here is just doing global warming because it never fails, so you might as well not run it. This one is flaky. You want to spend time? Don't fix the code, fix your test because this test is bogus and so on. So getting into this ability to really remove the noise and just get to what you should be doing is great. And the Rolls-Royce, or the BMW, the BMW of the features, in my opinion, is really the predictive test selection. So what you can see on that graph, and I'm going to zoom in, is on the x-axis, the time it takes to run this specific test suite, right, from 0 to 110 minutes. So it takes 110 minutes, that's close to 2 hours right? So if you want to run it all, it takes 2 hours, meaning you can run it 4 times a day for a workday for an engineer. But actually, if you look at what's the likelihood you get to find problems from your code, well, if you were to run it just for 40 minutes, you could pretty much be guaranteed you would find all of the issues already, right? Well, I want to do 10 times better. I don't want to run it 4 times. I want to run it 40 times. That's 11 minutes. Oh, still get 2/3 chance of catching things. I want to do it 80 times, right? That's 6-ish minutes. Still get 50% chance of catching it in just 6 minutes. Wouldn't it be better for my teams to do it 80 times a day, go fast, detect issues, get back to work, boom, 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 and then maybe every night I do, or twice a day, I do the full enchilada, right? Which takes a long time. So I'm going to capture those. But let's focus on what's the most urgent sooner rather than way too much. That takes a couple of weeks, a week or so with deep learning to learn about your code base and so on. So it's pretty amazing, and Kosuke will be talking about that in just a minute. Okay? So I'm at the end of my slides. Just as a summary, we're at an inflection point in our industry right now. We've always been. At CloudBees, every 2 to 3 years, it feels like we need to reinvent ourselves because the technology changes. It's true now. There is AI. You have SaaS that's growing like crazy. You would have asked your boss 5 years ago, can I use SaaS? You would have been fired. And today, it's like, oh, it's a big strategy. We're all moving to SaaS, right? So things are shifting all over the place very, very fast. And in that quest, I think it's an amazing way to have an insurance. An amazing thing to do to build this insurance is to make sure that whatever you build, whatever you deploy, can be a bridge between what you have and where you want to go. You're not going to have the luxury. At the time when we ask people to be a lot more productive, you're not going to have the luxury to say, yeah, let's rebuild things, let's convert things, let's move everything to the new world. That's never going to happen, right? So you might as well create that environment where you can live on both sides of the bridge and leverage that data, leverage those pipelines, and so on. So, yeah, that's it. Happy building. Thank you.